in the dense, mist-covered jungles of South America, where the towering trees stretch high into the sky, their leaves weaving together to form a thick canopy that shields the sunlight. A haunting legend is echoed through the ages. The air is thick with the scent of the earth, and the hum of the jungle fills every corner of the land. The trees themselves seem to whisper ancient secrets about a woman whose grief and longing would become a part of the very fabric of the jungle. Her name was Maria, and her sorrow would forever mark the river that wound its way through the heart of the land. The legend of LaLlorona, the Weeping Woman, still echoes through the generations. It is a tale filled with deep sorrow, betrayal, and the ever-present shadow of madness. The cries of Maria, lost in grieving, can still be heard on the wind, warning all those who venture too close to the river's edge. Her story begins in a time long past, a story that has become a part of the land, passed from one generation to the next. Maria was known throughout her village as a woman of unparalleled beauty. Her skin shimmered like polished ivory, her eyes sparkled with warmth and joy, and her long, flowing hair cascaded like a river of silk down her back. She was the pride of her family, and everyone who laid eyes upon her admired her grace and elegance. The villagers often whispered that she was destined for greatness. But despite her beauty, Maria's heart was full of dreams that stretched far beyond the boundaries of her small, quiet village. As a young woman, she fell in love with a man named Alejandro, a warrior from a distant tribe who had come to her village seeking shelter after a fierce battle. Alejandro was strong, tall, and commanding, with eyes that burned with a fierce intensity. His presence was magnetic, and Maria could not help but be drawn to him. They spent countless days together, walking through the jungle, talking under the stars, and sharing their hopes and dreams. Alejandro spoke of faraway lands and grand adventures, and Maria was captivated. For the first time, she believed that love could carry her beyond the confines of her simple existence. Alejandro, too, seemed taken with her beauty, her warmth, and her spirit. Together, they dreamed of a life beyond their village, of a future filled with love and happiness. As the seasons passed, their love deepened. Alejandro would return from his travels, bearing gifts from distant lands, and Maria would wait for him, her heart full of anticipation. But there was a growing unease that began to settle between them. Alejandro's eyes, once filled with warmth and passion, began to lose their fire. He became distant, his visits less frequent, and when he returned, his gaze seemed distracted, his thoughts far away. Maria, puzzled by this change, tried to reach him, to understand what had caused this distance between them. But no matter what she did, she could not bridge the gap that had begun to grow. She questioned him, but he only brushed her concerns aside, insisting that everything was fine. But Maria could sense that something was wrong. Something deep within him had changed. The man she loved was slipping away from her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The once vibrant love they shared began to fade, replaced by a coldness that left Maria feeling more alone than ever before. Then one day, after a long absence, Alejandro returned to the village. He was disheveled, his clothes torn and bloodstained, his face gaunt and weary. He had been to war again, this time facing a terrible enemy, and his return was marked by the deep trauma he carried. His eyes were filled with a wild, haunted look, and his voice trembled when he spoke. But what shocked Maria the most was the way he looked at her, cold, detached, as if she were a stranger. He told her that he could not stay with her, that his heart no longer belonged to her. There was someone else, someone he had met during his time away. Maria stood frozen, unable to comprehend the words he had just spoken. Her heart shattered as she realized that the man she had loved with all her soul had betrayed her. Alejandro's words cut through her like a dagger, but there was no time for retaliation. He walked away from her without looking back, leaving Maria standing in the middle of the village, her world crumbling around her. The days that followed were filled with sorrow and disbelief. Maria could not understand what had happened. She replayed every moment, every word, every glance, but the truth was impossible to accept. She had loved Alejandro with everything she had, and now he was gone, leaving her with nothing but heartache and emptiness. In the days that followed, Maria became a shadow of her former self. She wandered the jungle, her heart heavy with grief, her eyes clouded with tears. Her thoughts were consumed by Alejandro, and every memory of their time together felt like a cruel joke. She gave birth to a son, a beautiful child who resembled Alejandro in every way. But instead of filling her heart with joy, the child became a constant reminder of the love she had lost. Her love for her son was pure, but it was tainted by the anger and sorrow that consumed her soul. She could not escape the pain, and it began to eat away at her from the inside. One night, as the full moon bathed the jungle in a soft, silvery light, Maria stood on the edge of the river, staring into its depths. The water seemed to shimmer with a life of its own, its surface smooth and tranquil, as if inviting her to join it. She held her son in her arms, but she felt nothing but emptiness. The grief and pain inside her were too much to bear. In a moment of madness, driven by the weight of her despair, Maria stepped into the river, her feet sinking into the cold water. She walked deeper, feeling the current tug at her as the water rose higher, swallowing her up. The river was silent, its dark waters carrying her further into the night. She felt as if she were being pulled into another world, a world where there was no pain, no heartbreak. But as the water reached her chest, Maria realized what she had done. It was too late. The current was too strong, and she was no longer able to resist. She cried out for help, but the sound of her voice was lost in the silence of the river. Her last breath was consumed by the water, and she sank beneath its surface, her spirit now bound to the river forever. When the villagers found her body the next morning, they whispered that she had drowned herself in her grief, a broken woman whose heart could bear no more. But some say that her death was not the end of Maria's story. They say her spirit became trapped between the living world and the realm of the dead. The river became her prison, and her wails could be heard in the distance, carried by the wind. The villagers spoke of seeing her ghost, a figure dressed in tattered clothing, her hair wet and tangled, wandering along the riverbank. Her face was hidden behind a veil of sorrow, and her cries were filled with an unbearable sadness. She searched the river, calling out for her lost child, for Alejandro, for the love she could never have again. As the years passed, the legend of LaLlorona grew. It was said that her cries could be heard on moonlit nights, echoing through the jungle and across the river. The sound was so haunting, so filled with grief, that it could drive anyone who heard it mad. Children were warned not to venture near the river after dark, for it was said that LaLlorona would take them, believing them to be her own. No one knew how to stop her, how to put her spirit to rest. Some claimed that offering gifts to her, flowers, candles, or trinkets, could appease her, but others believed that nothing would ever satisfy her endless sorrow. To this day, the story of LaLlorona endures. In villages across South America, children are still told to stay away from the rivers, especially at night. The sound of Maria's wails is said to drift through the air, a chilling reminder of the price of love and the cost of grief. And some say that if you listen closely, you can hear her voice calling your name, lost in the wind, forever searching for the child she lost so long ago. The story of Maria, the weeping soul, remains a cautionary tale, a reminder of the darkness that can consume a heart when love is betrayed, and the haunting power of grief that lingers long after death. Her legend will live on as long as the rivers flow and the wind whispers through the trees, for LaLlorona's spirit is never truly at rest. It waits, eternally searching, eternally weeping,